Oh, something's different. Different is happening. I'm encouraged.
So it's being live streamed now.
I like it. Okay. So far, so good. Don't have to save that password. Oh, and I think we are rocking and rolling. I see Forrest already in the live chat. We were dealing with a little bit of a technical thing, but now we are rocking and rolling. Well, Hoosier Nation, we're gonna have to have a tough conversation tonight. This will by far be the most annoyed anyone is on our podcast for the entirety of basketball season. Indiana put themselves in a good spot. They had done the hard work. They played well, and they won games. They beat Ohio State, and they beat Purdue. They went on the road, knocked off Maryland. I was there. I saw Indiana put together a 40-minute performance to beat the Terps. And then there were 5 players who, in the build-up to the Northwestern game, and I was just telling Jevin this before we went live, a game that all of us considered to be a turning point game, even before the suspensions, 5 players decided to put themselves ahead of the program. And Mike Woodson came down hard. He suspended those 5 players, and Indiana went on to lose to the Northwestern Wildcats on Tuesday night to fall to 16-7 on the season. But obviously, a lot of big picture questions have now risen to the surface. We're going to dive into those and so much more here on episode 239 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Wednesday, February 9th, 2022, where I am your host, Nathan Krishnan. Here with me tonight is Indiana HQ contributor Jevin McCoskey, our normal co-host, Matt Lukens, under the weather tonight. There was not a one-game suspension, a one-show suspension for him. Just under the weather, a little load management. He'll be back for the stretch run here coming up next week. But Jevin, talk to me about what it was like in Welsh Ryan Arena as all the news came through, and then dive right in, okay? Yep. 5 guys don't get suspended all at once at functional, successful basketball programs.
Yeah.
How bad is this right now?
So I'm just going to start from the minute I heard anything about it. I was on my way to the arena, and one of my friends from high school, her mom texted me. She said, "What is this that I'm hearing about? We're going to be shorthanded tonight." And I looked at the people that I was with. It was me and 2 other people that are IU media. And I said, "What's going on?" Like, we had no idea. We checked Twitter. There was nothing on Twitter. So in our minds, we were like, oh, it's probably just some rumor that's floating around. And that's what it all started out as anyway. And then we get to the arena. Everybody's warming up. All players except for one. It was Parker Stewart. And he was sitting on the bench, but he was in his candy stripes, in his script warm-up, the button-up. It was 85 minutes till the game, so it was a little weird to see him in his candy stripes already. But it wasn't like he wasn't in the uniform. He wasn't in sweats, or he would. And every now and then he'd get up and he'd take a shot. And so it maybe seemed like, okay, give it to like 45, 50 minutes. Maybe that's when he'll start warming up, whatever. So then they start going through warm-ups, and the buzz is building a little bit more. People are trying to get a hold of JD, the SID, to ask what's going on. People are running around just asking anybody that has any sort of information what is going on. And me, I'm just sitting there and I'm like, okay, there hasn't been anything officially announced. There's no reason to think anything is going to happen. But it is a little odd to see that Parker Stewart is still sitting on the bench. And then little do we know, Don Fisher goes up to JD, and that's what I think. I'm assuming JD is the one who told him. Now, that is just an assumption that very well might not be right. But in his pregame show, he said that IU was going to be shorthanded. And as soon as that tweet went live, that's when everybody was like, okay, what happened? Who's not going to play and why? And then it was announced by Coach Woodson that the 5 players were going to be suspended for disciplinary reasons. That's all that we know. We don't know exactly why. Of course, there are rumors going around. But the 5 players being 2 starters, Xavier Johnson, Parker Stewart, key players in Michael Durr, Tamar Bates, and Christian Lander, who all five could have had phenomenal games as people were out and situations are situational.
Just
But the place itself, sea of red. There was more IU fans there than there were Northwestern fans. Every time IU scored, it was extremely loud.
Yeah.
It was just a great environment. And even though people found out that the five players weren't playing, you never felt until the buzzer hit zeros that IU wasn't going to win that game. And then whenever they did,
yeah,
the score said 59-51 in favor of Northwestern.
And it's another loss to a quad one team for Indiana, an 8-point loss to Northwestern. Northwestern's not bad.
I will say Northwestern plays everybody close, especially at home. They've only lost one game by double digits this year. It's not a good loss by any means, but they do play everybody close, especially at home.
Yeah, they went into Michigan State and won, played competitively in a lot of other games this year. The season isn't over, okay? Yeah. Hoosier Nation, season's not over. Indiana, if the season ended today, would make the NCAA tournament without question. And frankly, if Indiana wins the games that they're supposed to win, you're going to make the dance, okay? But we'll talk in detail more about March Madness later on in this episode. But let's not kid ourselves, right? You were talking, Jevin, about how any one of those five guys, if they had just decided to follow the leadership of the players who played, not only would they have been able to wear the Indiana uniform for one additional game, but they could have had their hallmark performance of the season, right? Imagine someone like Christian Lander or Tamar Bates, who are fighting so hard for playing time. They would have had 35 minutes, or I mean, who knows? Trey Galloway played 40. Maybe they get 40 minutes. They would have put up 20 shots. They could have scored 30 points. And if any one of those five guys just had an opportunity, made the choice to play for Indiana basketball, they could have had their biggest game of the season and helped Indiana win a Big Ten game on the road, which we know happens very rarely, even for the best programs in the conference. Michigan State went to Rutgers and lost by 20. Okay. Yeah. All right. It's rare and it's hard. And I talked about Lander and Bates, but that doesn't abdicate the other three players either. I'm more shocked that Xavier Johnson, Parker Stewart, and Michael Durr made this decision as well. Why? They have one thing in common. They all transferred to the school in the offseason or in recent memory, right? Parker Stewart a little bit before that. But at some point, all three of those players decided that they were going to leave a really good opportunity that they were in. Xavier Johnson at Pitt, Parker Stewart, where he was the guy at UT Martin, Michael Durr was the starter at South Florida. And I know Parker Stewart, some off the court stuff, but general point's the same. All three guys made a decision to come to Indiana University and say, this is the place. And they bought into the program and they bought into the tradition and they bought into Mike Woodson and they bought into the opportunity. And in college basketball, this is not the NBA, okay? College basketball, you get 30 chances to wear the uniform. And now more than ever, even that's in question because of COVID-19. You get 20 chances tops to wear the uniform in a Big Ten game. And these five players all decided that even for one game, they had bigger priorities. And that is a major issue now as you look for the rest of the season. I still expect Indiana to make the NCAA tournament, even with the tough schedule coming up. But as I mentioned earlier, it's very rare to see successful, highly operating, humming basketball programs suspend five guys, key players for a game. But that's where Indiana basketball is right now as they head into a very, very critical juncture of the season. Matt, as you look at the different stakeholders here, whether it's the players that missed out or the players that played, And I tip my cap to them. I salute them. Every single one of those players who played. We're not gonna dive too much into the actual basketball for the Northwestern game, just because it's really hard to extrapolate anything when only 7 guys are available and 6 of the 7 play, and everyone is dealing with crazy levels of fatigue. You guys watched the game. Indiana clearly missed a good chunk of their production. I think BTN said 46% of their minutes on this. It's obvious that Indiana was severely shorthanded from a basketball perspective. But between the players that missed out and the players that played, and Mike Woodson and IU basketball fans and the fans that spent hard-earned money to travel to Evanston to watch their Hoosiers play against the Wildcats, who's the biggest loser here? Because no one comes out of this looking good. Who's the biggest loser here as far as the different parties involved in the short term and the long term?
Well, I think the biggest loser are the ones who made the right decision, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who played. And I know in 2 months or a month and a half, when we look at this, we're going to say, well, they had 7 players available. They had Trace Jackson Davis. They had Race Thompson. They had 2 of their best players, and they still couldn't get the job done. And it's unfortunate because people like, you and I who sit and watch these games and we sit to take it in for what it is, we know what happened. But the real loser, in my opinion, are the ones who did play, because like I said before, we were missing 5 players, but the opportunity was still there to win that game. I mean, I know you say you don't want to talk too much about it, but it was a 4-point game with 3 minutes left.
Yeah.
And on the road, that's against Northwestern. I mean, that's with missing 5 players. It's just crazy to say it out loud. Like, missing 5 players. They're the ones who are going to get the rough end of this, and it's unfortunate. But I saw a tweet. I just wanted to say this really quick. I did see a tweet, and it was like, instead of playing the players who were available, I think Mike Woodson should just play all 5 that were struggling, and just let their gas.
I didn't even think about that.
Just let their gas tanks run out and just see what happens. I mean, obviously that wasn't going to happen, but it was just a tweet that I saw and thought that I would share. But yeah, no, I think at the end of the day, it's the ones that got the opportunity to play and still had to walk away with a loss, knowing that they could have won that game if their teammates were available.
Yeah, and I see the comments in the live chat. Forrest Gray is saying he loves what Coach Woodson did. And we'll talk about Coach Woodson here in a minute and how much he has on the line when he makes the decisions that he made. Because Mike Woodson, who's seen 1,000 times more basketball than any one of us, who's either hosting this podcast or joining this podcast or listening to this podcast, Mike Woodson knows the consequences of his actions, okay? And he's not just suspending guys for fun. Okay, we're going to talk about Woodson in just a minute, but Forrest Gray points out he thinks Woodson looks great. It's about time someone held players accountable. And looking at the reaction from Mike Woodson's press conference, I think that's the opinion of the majority as Indiana tries to come together and respond to what was a very turbulent week this past week. I completely see what you were saying about the players who played having the most downside to what happened over the course of this last week, because consider someone like Trace Jackson Davis, right? Somebody who's a leader for this team, somebody who's captain on this team, somebody who put up ridiculous numbers at different points all season. I think his approval rating among IU fans right now is lower than it's ever been, as far as this season is concerned, at least, because the biggest complaint it seemed like IU basketball fans had on social media after Northwestern game was, man, with all those guys out, Trace Jackson Davis should have dominated Northwestern. Trace Jackson Davis should have I'm putting numbers to this, but should have put 30 points and 16 rebounds and 5 blocks, and you should crush Northwestern. Are you kidding? Does anyone know how good Northwestern is? Specifically, their front court defense. Ryan Young is someone that all of you should know. You never hear about him because of all the other elite bigs in the conference, but Ryan Young has been the pain in the butt to Big Ten forwards throughout his entire career. He's one of the best defensive centers, or forwards at least, in the conference. And everyone on Northwestern knew Trace Jackson Davis was going to get the ball yesterday. So that's a great example of where the downside really does hurt someone like TJD. I mean, it's hard. It's hard for the players to play at their highest level when there's only 6 of them.
Well, that's also the thing. Like, I don't know how much like the cameras caught it for like the broadcast of the game, but there were multiple times where, and don't get me wrong, Trey Galloway is going to be a fan favorite if he's not already. There's
nobody who has the back of Trey Galloway more than IU basketball fans right now. He is easily the most well-regarded, highly regarded Hoosier at the moment.
And it's well warranted, obviously.
Absolutely.
I mean, everybody watches him play. But he doesn't usually handle the ball as much as he did against Northwestern. He did have 5 turnovers. And there were multiple times where Trace would be open on a roll off a pick and roll to the basket, and instead of trying to throw it up, he would try and bounce pass it, or he would look across the other side. And many times Trace would go back down the court and like begging for the ball. And that's not something we've seen him do since maybe a little bit last year, but more so his freshman year, like just being frustrated with not getting the ball. And speaking of players struggling or players hurting more than the ones that played, Xavier Johnson makes Trace Jackson Davis that much better. As good as Trace is, Xavier makes him that much better because that's how good Xavier Johnson is. So when you take away a point guard like that who not only gets downhill, can shoot the ball from 3, but is great in the pick and roll with Trace Jackson Davis, of course Trace isn't going to have the game that maybe he needed to have or expected to have. It's just not going to happen. And also, he did have 13 and 11, his 31st career double-double. Granted, he did not shoot well from the field, and that's, I think, everyone's biggest gripe is that he just seems to not have the touch around the rim.
4 for 13. It's in the live chat. Everyone knows that stat for some reason.
Yeah. But I just don't get the gripe with Trace Jackson Davis in this game.
You can't be upset about – he's the one reliable presence that Indiana has had throughout the entire season. Okay. And I understand he had tough games against Kofi Coburn and against Zach Edey. But guess what? You don't even get to see the full display that he can put up when he's in foul trouble. Yeah, Hunter Dickinson was also a problem. Hunter Dickinson's a very unusual matchup. How come no one points out when Trace Jackson Davis went up against E.J. Liddell on Ohio State, who, by the way, is the highest ranked player in the conference per Ken Pomeroy? Trace Jackson Davis took him to the woodshed. Yeah. But no one wants to remember that because you love that narrative of putting all of this frustration on your star player. You can't do that if you're an IU basketball fan. Embrace Trace Jackson Davis. Even then, like you said, 13-11, 2 steals, 3 blocks. He was one of the big reasons Indiana was competitive. You can't just look at the shooting numbers. That's why Indiana fans inappropriately booed Xavier Johnson at the start of the season, because you saw a guy who wasn't shooting the ball well, yet he was able to contribute in so many different areas. Just the shot wasn't falling. And that's the same thing happening to Trace Jackson Davis right now. The buckets will start coming perhaps as soon as Saturday at Michigan State.
Just one more thing about Trace is, like, I do want to tip my cap to him because he knows people are talking about him and he definitely sees all of these things. But still, just even today, he said, embrace the bad moments on Twitter. He's willing to take all this on because he knows the position that he holds within Indiana University basketball. And like you said, those shots are going to start falling. He is who he is. He's a dominant player. They will start falling. It's just a matter of if, or it's not a matter of if. It's just a matter of when. And even throughout the game last night, there were moments where, we pull in with it. We pull within 3. We pull within 4. And he's the first person running over in timeouts to make sure everybody's up. Even in a game where you don't have 5 players, Morrill could be down a little bit. He's the first person to make sure that everybody's where they're supposed to be. And that's where I don't think he gets enough credit, is being a leader. But that's just my last 2 cents on Trace.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one other thing I wanted to mention, though, is I know I was a little hard on IU fans there, but as far as who really suffered from those 5 players who got suspended before last night's game, by the way, we're recording this on Wednesday night for those of you who listen a little bit later on during the week, but IU basketball fans, while I don't agree with lashing out at Trace Jackson Davis, I do understand Indiana basketball fans displaying crazy high amounts of frustration right now because IU fans are a bit scarred from what has happened over the last 6-7 years, right? From the end of the Tom Crean tenure, where Indiana missed the tournament after making the Sweet 16, all the way through the entirety of the Archie Miller era. And it never really, except for the 2019-2020 season looked like Indiana was really an impactful presence in the Big Ten. This was the first time in a while, whether you can look at the Ohio State win, the Purdue win, the road win at Maryland, road win Nebraska, where Indiana really looked like a significant top half of the conference force in the conference. And all of a sudden, in the week from hell, you get clobbered by Illinois, 5 guys get suspended, and then you lose at Northwestern. And IU fans are smart. They know that the next 3 games are going to be tough. But as far as I'm concerned, Jevin, we talked about how 5 guys plus Rob Finney missed out on that game Tuesday night. Whose absence do you think hurt Indiana the most? I know you like to have all of them collectively, but every one of those guys, like I said earlier, who missed out could have had their best game as a Hoosier and won the game for Indiana. Whose absence do you think really hurt IU the most against Northwestern?
Well, I have 2 answers for this, but they're a little different. I have an answer for who hurt IU the most and who hurt themselves the most.
Say both of it, yeah.
Yeah, so who hurt IU the most, I think without question, is Xavier Johnson. He's the starting point guard. He's your main ball handler. He's the person who not only gets himself involved, but involves everybody else, and that includes Trace Jackson Davis, as I pointed out earlier. He makes TJD, as good as he is, that much better. He's a player who, over the last month, has taken a big leap forward in his game of play. The turnovers have lessened. He still gets in foul trouble every now and then, but that's just from him playing aggressive. That's not from that you're never gonna get mad at someone who plays aggressive. And his scoring has been up, rebounds, assists, all of it. He's been playing the best basketball we've seen him play over a stretch of games. And in a game where, like I said earlier, before we went live, he could have had like 22, 10, and 6 in this game. And nobody would have been really surprised because that's just, we saw Trey Galloway excel in this game. Imagine if we had a player like Xavier Johnson. So that is my player with who affected IU the most. But who affected themselves the most is Christian Lander. You will not find a person who has been begging for him to get more minutes than I have. You just won't. From the minute I was first on this podcast, I remember talking about how I believe Lander should get more minutes and more minutes as the season progresses. But when you have an opportunity like this, where you have someone who's playing point guard who's not even a true point guard, Rob Finney is hurt, and Xavier Johnson goes out with the suspension. You could have played 35 to 40 minutes this game, gotten as many shots as you wanted, and nobody would have questioned you. And so it's just like you just shot yourself in the foot, honestly. And it's a game where it could have been his best game in an Indiana uniform, and he threw it away, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you as far as who lost the most in this game. Lander is number 1 on my list. I also think Tamar Bates really hurt his chances. I look at Tamar Bates as someone who can be a significant shot in the arm for IU basketball down the stretch this season. You obviously give him some time in order to get up to speed, figure out things on that learning curve, especially in a conference like the Big Ten, one of the best basketball conferences in the country. But, if he followed the actions of someone like Trey Galloway or Race Thompson or Trace Jackson Davis or Anthony Leal, Bates would have played again 35 minutes. He would have had so many reps under his sleeve to take 15 shots, work through some stuff. He may have even gotten some minutes as a ball handler, as a facilitator for the offense. He could have had one of those games that down the road he puts on his NBA draft highlight tape. And instead, assuming everyone comes back, whether it's against Michigan State or Wisconsin, he's going to be, again, one of 10 or 11 guys in the rotation fighting for playing time. And now that Mike Woodson probably has Anthony Leal and Trey Galloway on his side, a little bit higher than Tamar Bates after what's happened over the course of the last week. As far as the guy who missed out that I think really could have helped the Hoosiers as a team, I underestimated how much Rob Finney's injury would hurt Indiana basketball. I obviously saw Finney go crazy against Purdue. We all did. But in the games after that, right? Michigan game, you name it. Rob Phinisee wasn't that impactful of a player. But when he went out against Penn State, I said, oh, well, okay, I guess this is a chance for Christian Lander, or maybe Trey Galloway a little bit more. There's so much more to that. Indiana has looked like a completely different basketball team without Rob Phinisee in the worst way you can imagine, right? They had a good first half against Illinois. I think they responded well in that Maryland game, but from a stability standpoint, from a steadiness standpoint, communication, Rob Phinisee showed some assertiveness in that Purdue game, showed some in that Minnesota game earlier this year. All that has been sorely missed for IU basketball. So I'm not sure when Rob Phinisee is going to return, but his absence has really stood out to me as I look at IU basketball here in the moment that we're in. This was our weekly podcast poll. I asked all of you out there in Hoosier Nation, whose absence hurt the most in IU's loss at Northwestern. You had 4 options: Xavier Johnson, Rob Phinisee, obviously due to injury, Parker Stewart, and then the 4th option was a combination of Christian Lander, Tamar Bates, and Michael Durr, because Twitter only gives you 4 options. The runaway winner, agreed with you, Jevin, so Xavier Johnson, 84%. His absence really did affect the Hoosiers, and over 300 votes have come in here in the first hour that this poll's been up. So if you haven't cast your vote yet, make sure you head over to our Twitter account at the Hoosier Sound, cast your vote here. We've got a lot more to discuss here on this midweek episode of the Hoosier Sound. We're going to dive into Mike Woodson and his clearly metaphorical line in the sand moment in his first year as an IU basketball coach here in just a moment. But first, it's time for Who Won the Week this past week in IU sports. And hey, let's tip our cap to IU men's golf. They gave us some good news over the course of this past week. How about the men's golf program defeating Purdue and Michigan State on the last day of competition to win the overall team title at the Big Ten Match Play Championships down in Florida? Big shout out to Mitch Davis and Noah Gillard, who swept both their matches on the final day against the Boilermakers and the Spartans. So IU men's golf, you deserve a salute here on Who Won the Week this past week. And also, how about 3 Hoosiers in the football program getting their invite to the NFL Combine? Ty Freifogel, Peyton Hendershot, and Micah McFadden are all heading to Lucas Oil Stadium for the NFL Combine, which starts on March 1st. Looking forward to seeing them show out in their drills to get selected in the NFL draft. Indiana has something like a 7 or 8 year streak of guys selected in the NFL draft. I'm looking forward to seeing which Hoosiers get picked in that selection process in late April. But if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. That is the Hoosier Sound. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound. This part is important. If you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. That type of support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. More passionate now than ever, obviously. But anyway, let's move on here. Mike Woodson, Jevin, line in the sand moment. Talk to me about Mike Woodson in his press conference after the game. Were there any comments he made that really stood out to you? I know everyone can read the text and the quotes that come through on social media, but from a tone standpoint, from a frustration standpoint, anger standpoint, how would you describe the tone and the message that Mike Woodson sent to his players after the game on Tuesday night?
Yeah, well, we all know that Mike Woodson isn't a very energetic person. Like he doesn't like bring all that energy.
Not really like an upbeat speaker.
Right. But you could tell that last night he was very disappointed. And he mentioned, he said, I just left that locker room and every player in there knows exactly how disappointed I am. And it also goes even like from head coach to walk-ons. It was just everybody's disappointed. And I don't want you guys to think that the players who did this stuff aren't disappointed in themselves, because Trace touched on it. They are. Like, they know they messed up, and they did try to be great teammates as good as they could. I know they couldn't necessarily be there for their teammates when they needed them most, but they did do what they had to do. And after being punished. But back to Woodson, there was one question that stood out in particular where one of the reporters asked, being the head coach of Indiana University, what does this mean for you? Like what is next? And he mentioned that he's not here for 1 year. He's here to build a culture, and everything that he does is to reflect Indiana University, not just Indiana University basketball. And I think this is a prime example of that. Yeah, he knows the repercussions of sitting 5 players. He knows that it's going to make any game you play difficult. But he's not looking at one game. He's looking at his entire tenure that he's going to have and what he's going to leave whenever he does eventually move on to whatever's next for Mike Woodson. And I think that's special because I don't know how many coaches around the country would have done something like that, especially sitting 2 starters in conference play. There was another question that was asked about, did you think about the implications this would have had in March when you made this decision? And he said, I'm worried about one game at a time, but he's more so worried about the people that are on the team, not the outcomes of games. This is something he's made very clear before too. He's more so teaching them how to be good men before he teaches them how to be good basketball players. And I think that's what a great coach does. So he didn't make the decision based on anything coming in March. He doesn't know how long this is going to last. He might now, but he did mention that he was going to take the entire plane ride home to figure out just how long that he wants this suspension to be. So don't be surprised if 1, 2, 3, 4, all 5 don't play on Saturday again. But he also mentioned that he didn't even know about this until the morning of. So he had no time to prepare. And Trey Galloway mentioned that, they had an entire game plan that they had to just kind of scrap because when you're missing 5 players, 2 of which are starters, 3, 4 of which play significant minutes, I mean, you got to kind of make up a new game plan. But
I can imagine,
yeah. But Woodson definitely was disappointed, and like I said, he's not one of those people that show much emotion anyway when he talks. But you could definitely tell that there was a lack of whatever emotion he usually has.
And I think one question a lot of IU fans are asking is, should he care more about the wins and the losses here, right? The results, the record, the resume going into March Madness. Indiana hasn't made the NCAA tournament in so long. And for that, I think Woodson actually is, in a way, considering these things. What Woodson is basically saying now is, hey, I might take a hit for this Northwestern game. I might hurt our chances of winning this Northwestern game. But for the rest of the season, this one loss might turn into 2 or 3 wins between now and the end of the season.
Yeah.
That's where I think Mike Woodson is coming from. And I wholeheartedly, Javin and I, we cover the team on a regular basis. We don't know anything more than you know about what happened in the events that led up to this. Okay. Nothing official. Okay. Besides the chit chat going on in the rumor mill.
And there won't be.
And there never will be. So you'll never get that answer from IU basketball, but I fully stand behind Mike Woodson in his decision here. Because now as I think about the rest of the season, right? If the 5 players do have the opportunity to play against Michigan State on Saturday, you don't think they're going to be motivated?
Mm-hmm.
You don't think they're going to be inspired to treasure every second they have on that court? I know Xavier Johnson will be. He's already posted on social media about, indirectly about how he regrets his actions that led to missing that Northwestern game. You don't think those players are not going to take a second for granted, especially because they know that any one of those guys who played, specifically Trey Galloway, Anthony Leal, and Jordan Geronimo, could instantaneously replace them in the starting lineup because they started against Northwestern in the case of Galloway and Leal. Geronimo got plenty of minutes, showed what he's capable of, got the rough end on some calls, but all it takes is a blink of an eye. And they know now, those players that missed out, they have a lot of work to do to regain the trust of Mike Woodson as well as their fellow Hoosiers who did play on Tuesday night. Now, Jevin, this decision and how that Northwestern game played out might lead to some basketball consequences here. And when you look at how Trey Galloway played, and when you look at how Anthony Leal played or Jordan Geronimo played, do you think there will be long-term changes to the starting lineup as you go into the rest of the season? Do you expect Parker Stewart, for example, to hear his name called in the starting lineup in his first game back, whether it's against Michigan State or Wisconsin?
Ooh, I don't. I really don't. And this is going to sound very harsh, and I don't mean for it to. But when you look at what Anthony Leal was able to give you, I know he didn't play. I know he didn't shoot particularly well, but he had 5 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists. I think Anthony Leal and Parker Stewart are the same player, and I think that Anthony Leal is a better athlete. Now,
better defensively too.
Better defensively, and he's younger. And he's younger. So the more minutes that he's going to be, I don't think Anthony Leal is going to maybe he will start, and maybe this is exactly correct, and you should listen to me about everything that I ever say about IU basketball. But I don't know. I just think that Parker's been struggling. Miller Kopp has also been struggling, and maybe Woodson uses this as a jump start to make that first real change in the starting lineup, and nobody would blame him.
Do it.
Yeah, nobody would blame him.
Do it. I think more people blame him for starting the usual Johnson, Stewart, Kopp, Thompson, and Jackson Davis, even with a full-strength roster. Can we please see Trey Galloway in the starting lineup? Please. And I know Anthony Leal played well, but I'm going to focus on Trey Galloway, okay? He looked capable of playing point guard, and he's not going to be asked to play point guard the rest of the season, or at least whenever Xavier Johnson and then eventually Rob Finney return. But as a ball handler, as a facilitator, as a jack of all trades, Trey Galloway deserves.
He's such a good defender.
Outstanding defender.
Yeah.
He's got that floater game. He's got the layup game. He's got the ability to take contact. He's got the ability to make the pass. He's clearly, with the playing time, someone who can score double figures. Let's see him in the starting lineup. And if nothing else, he's shown the coaching staff and the fan base to be someone who deserves to have his name called in the starting lineup, as someone who respects what it means to play for the program. So I need to see Trey Galloway get the call here from now until the end of the season. Every game Trey Galloway does not start from here on out is a missed opportunity. I mean, do we need this 13 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, a block shot? Of course, he turned the ball over. Anyone who plays point guard in a starting position against a good Big Ten team is going to turn the ball over a crap ton, especially when it's, a completely unexpected development building up to the game. Give me Trey Galloway. He is the prototypical modern day NBA player, positionless. He can do 18 different things. I want to see him on the court.
So my question is, we had this conversation a couple weeks ago, and I said to keep him coming off the bench because he does bring that spark. Now, and I also mentioned that it's not necessarily as important about who starts. It's about more important who finishes. But in this case, I do agree with you because I think just culturally a change might be needed. And it's weird to say because 2 weeks ago we weren't saying culturally a change is needed.
But it's real now.
I think if those 5 players didn't get it after what happened, if they took Parker out of the starting lineup, I think all 5 of them would understand then. Okay, what we did has consequences.
And maybe it sucks for Parker Stewart to be an example, to be made an example, but
no, when I say that, I don't want Parker to not play. I think Parker would still play. They would literally just flip. It's not, and Trey plays starter minutes coming off the bench, and I think Parker maybe wouldn't play as many minutes, but he would still get a significant amount of time. It's just that I just culturally think that it just makes sense.
I completely agree, and it checks all the boxes. And I agree with all your comments on the culture and the off the court implications and the message that it's sending. I also think that right now Trey Galloway is one of Indiana's 5 best players.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And I think, right, we can discuss who is 1 and 2 and 3 and whatever, but all I know is Trey Galloway is one of Indiana's 5 best players and deserves close to 30 minutes per game.
I'd put him 4.
I mean, and if you can teach him, right? Look, because of the opportunity he got on Tuesday night, now okay, Trey, let's fix the turnovers and let's fix the hook and holds and let's fix these kind of blemishes in your game because there's a lot of good there.
But also those hook and holds and those some of those turnovers don't come if you don't play all 37 minutes. Now, a lot of that,
he played 40.
Played 37 because he didn't get to play the last 3 minutes.
Oh, you're right. You're my bad.
But a lot of that doesn't happen if you get a break every now and then, or and your only breaks aren't timeouts. So and back to your thing, I would put him 4. I'd put Trace, Race, Xavier.
I agree.
And then Trey.
Yeah. I think you're right. I might swap Xavier Johnson for Race Thompson, but of course now you're in this context of, well, Xavier Johnson got suspended. So for all those reasons, start Trey Galloway. Whether you can pick either Parker Stewart or Miller Kopp to take out. I would be stunned if Parker Stewart started at least in this first week or two after he returns. We'll see how these things play out. Lastly, Jevin, I saw on social media last night or this morning over the last 24 hours that one notable response to Mike Woodson's decision came from the mother of Indiana 2022 basketball recruit CJ Gunn. And Miss Gunn, Linda, I believe is her first name, pointed out that she was fully behind Mike Woodson's decision to suspend these players. It shows how much he cares about building young adults and teaching them important life lessons. I saw Raphael Davis on last night's Big Ten Network post-game show make a really good point. Davis was a star at Purdue, and he said, look, right now, these players are the big man on campus. They are big fish, small pond. Everyone treats them like a celebrity, but the minute you're out, unless you're, Joel Embiid or a superstar in the Steph Curry, Karl Anthony Towns, whatever, like once you move on into the real world, if you break a rule like this, it's not a one-day suspension in a lot of cases. Raphael Davis said you get fired. And so when I saw the mother of CJ Gunn really bring her support to Mike Woodson, I was impressed and surprised. And I said, okay, this decision that Mike Woodson made is going to have maybe not a positive effect on recruiting. It might. It's definitely not going to hurt recruiting going forward.
Yeah, no, I don't see it having any negative impact whatsoever. I completely agree that this was what needed to happen. And it goes back to the word culture. Like everybody wanted this kind of coach. And then whenever a decision like that has to be made, they start to question it a little bit.
Can't backtrack now.
No, you can't. And we all wanted that Knight era sort of coach who played under him or had the same coaching style.
Hold your players accountable.
This is something Knight would have done. Maybe it would have been a little more extreme. But the decision was made. He's the head coach. He's allowed to make those kinds of decisions. And he seems to have the majority of support from the fan base. And honestly, if I'm being honest with you, being a former player, and in no way am I saying like, oh, I would have made these mistakes. But if I did make that mistake, I would want to be held accountable, especially if I played for a university like Indiana. I wouldn't want to be able to get away with something like that, knowing that I hurt my team. Like I would want to be held accountable. So I do think that those 5 players know exactly what they did. They understand why they were put on the bench for a game, and they're going to use it as motivation, like you said earlier. And when it comes to recruiting, I think every recruit can look at this and say, okay, that's a coach that's going to hold me accountable. He's not going to let me, and that goes far beyond making mistakes off the court. That's okay. If I don't work hard on the court, he's going to get on me. If I don't make the right decision with the ball, he's going to get on me. And it just goes far beyond the game of basketball as well. Like I just think knowing that you can be held accountable is a big thing. And I think that Woodson knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah. If you don't want to be coached or taught in your days of playing college basketball, Indiana may not be the right place for you.
Yeah.
As long as Mike Woodson's the head basketball coach. Just to get the exact quote on the tweet from Linda Gunn, she said, "One of the many reasons I'm so excited for CJ Gunn to play for Mike Woodson. He sets high standards for his team. He holds his players accountable. It's so much bigger than basketball. Hashtag IUBB. Hashtag building men." So especially when parents respond like that of current or potential recruits, this type of decision makes waves beyond just the 13 scholarship players on the roster. So look, definitely a lot for the players and Mike Woodson to digest over the course of the last few days. We're not going to dive into a granular preview of Michigan State and Wisconsin coming up. There's just too much to talk about in this episode. We will give our prediction for the Michigan State game in just a minute, but we also, on our next segment, want to dive into Indiana and their NCAA tournament chances as things stand. That'll come in a moment. But first, it's time for our social media shout out, where news came through today in the IU football program that the season opener for 2022 will be in prime time on Friday night on September 2nd, the first weekend in September, as the Hoosiers take on the Illinois Fighting Illini. It's a game Indiana should be favored in. It's a game Indiana should win. And in fact, seeing how the schedule looks, the start of the season, IU should start 3-0, right? With home games against Idaho and a revamped Western Kentucky roster, all of which take place in Bloomington. That, friends, would top last year's win total. So you see Indiana, they're starting 3-0. They have road trips to Cincinnati, a reconstructed Cincinnati team, and a road trip to Nebraska right after. So, hey, if nothing else, the schedule will be a little bit more forgiving to IU football this upcoming season. And what better opportunity to kick things off than under the lights, Memorial Stadium, first game of the season, always big student turnout for that season opener. So I can't wait to see what it looks like, whether it's on Big Ten Network or Fox Sports 1 or the ESPN networks, regardless of where the game is televised, which channel. I'm sure the environment will be outstanding. By the way, Illinois plays a week 0 opener, so they're actually going to be on short rest coming to Bloomington for IU season opener. But while we're here, once again, if you don't follow us already, make sure you give us a follow on Indiana HQ or at the Hoosier Sound, at Indiana HQ or at the Hoosier Sound on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, on Instagram, or Indiana.HQ. So make sure you follow us if you don't already. If you do, retweet us, like us, share our stuff, tell your friends, family, strangers. Don't follow us to make sure you do, because we are your one-stop shop between now and the rest of the season, the off season, and the football season. We keep doing it nonstop until the end of time. Jevin, you've got boots on the ground for every game from here on out. And for some of the road games, I'll be there. And we're going to be there for the postseason too. So make sure you have our back on social media. You won't regret it. All right, Jevin, look, sky's not falling. Okay?
Not yet.
Even if Indiana loses their next 3 games, which they will almost certainly be underdogs in 2 of them and probably a third in that home game in Wisconsin, they'll still sit in a decent position at 16-10. Right now, Ken Pomeroy has Indiana finishing the regular season at 19-11. And that would, according to current bracketologists, put Indiana into the big dance. Right now, they're currently not on the bubble, sitting somewhere in that 7-9 range. But of course, they will drop, seeing that their next 3 games are quite difficult. Jevin, talk to me about IU men's basketball and the NCAA tournament. This is not as strong of a Big Ten as we've seen in recent years. Indiana had a weak non-conference schedule. Do they need to win either one of these next 3 games or that road game at Purdue to get into the big dance?
Well, here's the thing. We know that we can win at least. We played all 3 of these teams and handled our own for a majority of all the minutes of all 3 of the games. You look at the Wisconsin game, we won 36 of the 40 minutes. And then you look at the Ohio State game, and we obviously held our own. We beat them at Assembly Hall. You look at the Purdue game, I know it was at Assembly Hall, playing at Mackey is going to be extremely tough, especially with how hot Purdue is right now.
And then you also have that Michigan State game coming up on Saturday.
Yeah, and the Michigan State next, but also Michigan State's been struggling.
Yeah,
they've lost their last 2 games as well, and to one of them being Northwestern at home. I would be disappointed if Indiana doesn't win 2 of their next 4 games, or I guess 2 of their next 4 games. I would be disappointed if they don't beat Wisconsin at home, and I'd be disappointed if they don't beat Ohio State on the road. I know it's going to be a tough game, but I'd be very disappointed. And so, like you said, right now, no, it's not a don't panic, don't hit the button,
don't go crazy.
Breathe, breathe. But if we don't play up to the standard that we've seen over the next 3 weeks, we could be starting to put our hand on the button.
Yeah.
And like you said, we should finish with 19 wins. At the beginning of the season, I always said that the number was 20. I, for whatever reason, thought that 20 would have been the number. 10 Big Ten wins, maybe 11. We'll see what we finish with. But no, do not hit the panic button right now. Listen, you're talking to somebody who hasn't seen a tournament team while I've been here at IU, and the last class could say that too. So if anybody should start panicking early, it might be me, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to hold the button up. We still have a solid team, and if everybody has their head on straight, we're going to be hard to beat. We're going to be in every game. Our defense is going to keep us in every game. Just a matter of how the offense looks, and I believe that we're going to be heading in the right direction once everybody gets their head on straight.
I don't think Indiana's going to win any of their next 3 games, right? You talk about at Michigan State on Saturday, home Wisconsin on Tuesday, at Ohio State the following weekend. I don't think Indiana's going to win any of those 3, but I still think Indiana will be okay.
Yeah.
Because even if they're at 16-10, you have 3 winnable games that follow, okay? Just to give you the full scope of that, it's a home game against Maryland, road trip to Minnesota, home game against Rutgers. Then you wrap it up with that road trip at Purdue. So I think Indiana's in at 19 wins. The question, though, that I think I know the answer to, but I want to ask you anyway.
Yeah.
Even with a cramped Big Ten schedule here between now and the end of the regular season, March 5th, less than a month away at Purdue, would you be interested in seeing Indiana schedule a cupcake here to bank another win? Remember, their game against UNC Asheville in the first half of the season was canceled. Even with the stress and the anxiety of the Big Ten schedule, would you like to see Indiana schedule another non-conference cupcake between now and the end of the season just to bank another win?
No. And let me tell you why. Because I think that, like I said, I'm not hitting that panic button. I do think we're going to make the tournament, so I don't think that benefits us in any way. I think, what is scheduling another cupcake? I don't think that does a lot for. It
does get you to 20.
Yeah, but if we already think that we'll be fine no matter what, then we don't necessarily need that 20th win. And that just gives everyone else a reason to just say another thing about how negatively Indiana schedules their conference or their non-conference opponents. Yeah, also, a win against Minnesota is gonna do more for our team than a win against some low-level non-conference team. Right. So I just don't think that it's necessary. I wouldn't be mad if they did it, I guess, but I just don't think it's necessary.
Right. Well, the downside then would be the reduced rest. Yeah. The downside would also be it's not a guarantee win. Right. You could lose.
And what if you go out against a non-conference opponent and Trace Jackson Davis does something to his leg and can't play? Knock on wood, obviously, but
yeah. And if not him, someone else, right? I mean that risk is absolutely there. And again, you could lose, right? I mean, USC scheduled Pacific yesterday in a non-conference game that was relegated to some deep dark corner of Pac-12 network. And Pacific had a lead there until the very end, and USC did come from behind and get a win. But if I know USC basketball fans, they're probably going to say, well, that only raises more questions about our basketball team than answers them. So again, Ken Pom has Indiana finishing 19-11 this season, 10-10 in conference play. And once again, the schedule from here on out is at Michigan State, home Wisconsin, at Ohio State, home Maryland, at Minnesota, home Rutgers, and then at Purdue to wrap up the regular season. And then Indiana Right now, they're projected to finish in a three-way tie for sixth between Rutgers and Michigan. So you can say, all right, Indiana will be either 6, 7, or 8 in the Big Ten. And if that's how it all wraps up, they will go dancing. But there's one thing that you know about Indiana basketball is that in either direction, almost none of it is predictable. In fact, I see Forrest Gray in the live chat saying he believes Indiana wins 4 more games: Wisconsin, Minnesota, Rutgers, Maryland. Good chance to beat Michigan State and Ohio State as well. So again, if you win 4 more, you get to 20.
Yep.
And everyone's okay. And I know earlier this season, I talked on this podcast about how the goals for this team should really be more than 20. I think this team is good enough to go and win 24 games during the regular season this year. I saw a lot of potential on this basketball team, but maybe now the time to go above and beyond 20 wins is in the NCAA tournament. I actually see Indiana as a team that has the makeup of a team that can win a game or two, if not more, in March Madness. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Indiana does play Michigan State on Saturday afternoon coming up here, Jeff. It's a Saturday afternoon tip at 3:30 Eastern over on Fox. Michigan State is a team that had been looking really good all season. You're talking about a team that was 17-4 up until this past weekend. And on Saturday, they went to Rutgers and lost by 21 days after escaping with a narrow win at Maryland. And then on Tuesday, they fell at home to Wisconsin 70-62. So if nothing else, Indiana is getting Michigan State at a good time, or you can argue at a dangerous time. Michigan State's probably going to be upset at Breslin Center in East Lansing. Jevin, who do you think wins for Indiana? But almost more importantly, who do you think plays for IU on Saturday?
Well, I think for the same reasons you think that Michigan State could come out and play their best game, I think the same thing for Indiana. They have lost their last 2 games. They're coming off a game where they've missed a majority of their production and their minutes of players that have played. So who says IU can't come out and have their best game of the season, and it would come at a good time as well. I don't think all 5 of those players are going to play. I just don't, for whatever reason. I think when you look at some of the people who got suspended, two of them haven't. Michael Durr and Christian Lander haven't been getting a load of minutes as of recent anyway, unless we're playing someone with size. But even against Michigan State, their size is athletes. They're not like
they're not Kofi and Zach.
Right.
Edey.
Yeah. They are people who can go around you and put it on the floor. And I don't think Parker plays. I don't think Parker plays either. I think the 2 that are going to play are Tamar and Xavier. I think Coach Woodson's going to look at Xavier and say, "You're playing because we need you, not necessarily because you deserve to be playing." Because they messed up. But I do think that this team needs Xavier. But I can't see us walking into East Lansing and picking up a win.
Me neither. Me neither. I think Indiana
I want to be wrong. I do.
Indiana loses to Michigan State as well. This is the worst team to play when you're coming off the situation that Indiana's coming off of. Michigan State's going to be angry and fired up for the Saturday afternoon game. Again, as you can imagine, Michigan State's got a ton of good players. Marcus Bingham, Tyson Walker, who transferred in from Northeastern, Gabe Brown, Max Christie, who's a 5-star freshman, Joey Hauser, the veteran, AJ Hogarth's doing better, Malik Hall's hitting some big shots.
Max Christie's starting to come into his own too. He's starting to play really well. Yeah. Good to
great basketball team. They're going to peak again in March, I think. But as far as I'm concerned, my hunch is that all the players do dress and are available to play for Indiana. But at the end of the day, my prediction is a loss for IU by like 11. I don't see Indiana really making this a 1 or 2 score game. I have Michigan State winning this one 74-63, and I do anticipate a change to the starting lineup. If, again, everyone is available, I would predict Trey Galloway gets the start against the Spartans on Tuesday. we'll see where things are at. Hey, again, I said this in previous games against Illinois, Michigan. If Indiana can keep it close, we can see what happens there in the closing stretch. But even against Northwestern, Indiana let go of the rope just a little bit at the very end, and they were not able to even make it a free throw contest when it was all said and done. So that's how Jevin and I see the Michigan State game playing out on Saturday. If Indiana wins, everything from the last week, no, I'm not sure if everything gets forgotten, but obviously wins are the best medicine here, especially at this point in the season. So Jev, as we wind down on this Wednesday night, definitely a lot to talk about. What are your closing thoughts here as Indiana faces a lot of turbulence, again, caused by 5 of their own?
Yeah. And it's not going to get any easier with the schedule that we play. And we play in the gauntlet that is the Big Ten. But this is just the way I think about it is be behind the players that we have. Yeah, they made a mistake, but there's no reason to just keep throwing dirt on them whenever they're down. And I think that will come through in the leadership that we have. And I think Trace Jackson Davis, Race Thompson, and head coach Mike Woodson are going to be the first people to let those players know, yeah, you messed up, but listen, we got basketball to play, and we need every one of you. So we're going to need everything you guys got. And I've said it all year. This team is the biggest family I've ever seen in a basketball team. They do love one another, and they love playing for each other. So I do think that they're going to have each other's backs, but it will be known that they made a mistake. And I'd love to be a fly on the wall for the next practice, maybe. But I just think that the worst is behind us with this whole thing, and I think that it will get better.
Yeah, right. And now it's time for Indiana to respond.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. It's time for Indiana to respond. People in life, even outside of basketball, make mistakes, and for some people, it makes them sharper, smarter, stronger, better people. And we'll see how these players respond after not having the chance to play for Indiana University on Tuesday night. From a basketball perspective, the sky isn't falling either. I watched the University of San Francisco, who, by the way, is having a really strong season. I saw them lose a home game to the University of Portland. Okay, and San Francisco right now is higher than Indiana in the Ken Pom ratings. Well, they were until they lost to Portland. St. Mary's, who's in the top 25, they lost to Santa Clara the same night that Indiana lost to Northwestern. Right, earlier this week we saw Virginia go into Cameron Indoor and beat Duke. In fact, as we record this podcast, Ohio State went into Rutgers and lost. Early over the weekend, we saw Michigan State go into Rutgers and lose by 20. So as much as it hurts as an IU basketball fan to see the Hoosiers lose to Illinois by 18 or lose to Northwestern in some crazy circumstances, look, as long as you're not Gonzaga or Purdue or Baylor, right, there's a lot of churn that happens from 20 to 40 in college basketball, and you're seeing it happen on a nightly basis. Between now and the end of Wednesday night or Thursday night, I'm sure there'll be 5 or 6 or 10 other crazy results. So that about wraps it up for our 239th show of the Hoosiers Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. Thank you to our live audience. You are all beautiful people. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and